Welcome to my tips and tricks on how to survive the standard game in PocketCiv, which means survive till era 8 because it's quite difficult in this game. So tip number 1. Now at the beginning of the game you want to look at the potential places for your cities. So the first city you want to have, you always want to have in an area where you have a mountain and a farm, which in the beginning means an area where you have a mountain and a forest, because you will turn the forest into a farm. This is important because there are certain upgrades that this city will allow you to get, like masonry and other things that are quite useful. So on my particular map, your potentials for cities would be region 3, region 5, and region 8. So those are going to be looking at. Now in the first turn you're not going to be, you don't necessarily want to immediately build a farm or a city. Instead you want to spread around so that you get as many people as possible. Trick number 2, when it comes to the first city, is you always want to look at this number over here. Now you start the first era with 16 cards, and there are always 2 cards which have this first number, like 1, 2 cards with that being 2, 3, and up to 8. And what's really important is that once a card is passed, for example, this one that's giving me the volcano, it had a number 2, which means there's only one more card in the deck that has on this left up top number 2. Now, as this event resolves, I get a second card with number 8. So far what has happened, I've had a card number 2 and card number 8 pass. Now, upon my next turn, when I'm deciding where I want to build a city, my potentials were cities at position 3 and 5, and 8 actually got ruined, so it's now just 3 and 5. But what you want to look at is which numbers have already passed, and that will tell you which regions are safe. So for example, there will be at most one event happening in this era at region 8. So region 8 is fairly safe to build a city in. Similarly to region 2, but I can't build a city there because it's not useful. Another interesting trick that's, though not always useful, but sometimes in the next turn I will normally want to build a farm and then a city, but if this takes too many turns, something bad might happen in the meantime. So what I actually did here, I put 6 people total in region 5. So that means if I can survive the next event, if it doesn't affect region 5, I will be able to immediately create a farm and then immediately after that a city very quickly, which will allow me to sort of like progress a little bit faster in the game. So the next event, nothing happened. Because of the new trick, I can build a farm here and then I can immediately build a city here so that the city is supported by the farm. And now I was able to in one turn do all of this. Now if you want to go really extra, you might want it in the previous turn to move 2 more people into this region so that you could immediately get your very first advancement. Tip number 4, which advancement you should take. So it can be quite tempting to take the slave labor, because what it does, it allows you to immediately increase the AV of a city by 1 during every upkeep turn. I don't recommend this, and the reason why is because you will need to get engineering at some point, which will allow you to get your maximum AV of your cities to 3. In order to get engineering, you need to get masonry. And masonry does the exact same thing as slave labor. So the disadvantage, so if I were to take slave labor now, it gives me the benefit of being able to increase the AV of my city 1 turn earlier, but it also takes away one possible sort of advancement that I can get, which now isn't necessarily that big of a deal at the first eras, but upon later eras, especially when you're going to be losing entire cities due to events, you will need to build the cities back up to get the next advancement that you need, and that's going to be quite difficult if you have unnecessary or useless advancement like slave labor, because it's going to just take up space. Now, I could potentially make a separate video on which of these are important, but just quickly, I think another thing that's really good to get in the beginning is cardage. This is especially beneficial because it means that you can have farms in places where there are no cities. This is useful because, for example, in region 2, currently you can't really do anything there because if you build a city, it will not be supported, so it will get immediately destroyed. It also means that I cannot walk into this area, so I can't really get any of my tribes into region number 1 because it's being blocked by region number 2. One way to alleviate that is if you were to get a road building. which is possible, but for that you need to get carriage anyway. But carriage itself actually fixes this problem for you, because you can have a farm, for example, in region number 7, and then a city in region number 2, which will allow you to then easily move through. So masonry and cartage are one of the first two things. Another thing I like to take in the beginning is this basic tools, because it makes increasing a city's AV reduced by 1, which makes it a lot cheaper, especially in the beginning. Next step, astronomy. Astronomy is extremely important, and I recommend getting it as soon as possible. You still need to get the other things like cartage just so you can survive, but astronomy is amazing because it allows you to once per era ignore an event. What's important is to note is that you will draw a new event card, so it's not like you can just ignore an event and nothing happens, but it does allow you to sort of pass through the events a little bit faster and avoid really bad events. Especially in the beginning of the game, one of the worst events is visitation, because unless you get super lucky and it turns into a trade, enemies that are really strong of strength of like 10 or so might be able to destroy your people, which will cause you a lot of damage. And astronomy allows you to sort of bypass that and move further in the note. Now, speaking of events, if you're interested in a separate guides where we could talk about them, just let me know. But for the moment, I just want to say, and that especially good event is Superstition. Since in the standard game, your goal is only to survive all 8 eras, which by itself is quite hard. Superstition, what it does, it essentially sort of removes cards. So it will like move you through the cards faster. So it will move you to era 8 a little bit faster. So Superstition is actually good, and it's something that you do not want to avoid with your astronomy. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this guide. Let me know what are your tips for the game down in the comments. Bye bye!